Hey, good evening, everyone. This is everyone's old pal, the Naked Bigfoot, coming to bring you another chapter 4, part 4, to the tale of the Skinnerman. But before we begin, just to let everybody know, I appreciate everybody who's on tonight and everybody who will be joining us tonight. Also, I want to put out a slight warning since this is a live stream. If you have any children in the room, I'm known for cussing on occasion. Pretty foul language that comes out of my mouth on occasion, so you may not want them in the room with you while that's going on. Oh, it's good to see everybody. Super Horror Show. Um, the Bald and Bonkers crew. You guys are pretty awesome. Y'all on tonight. But with that said, um, one more little word of warning. I will say things. Hey. I will say things that are not part of the mainstream Christian religion or mainstream religion or belief systems. So if you're fragile in any sort of way, I strongly uh, tell you to turn me off now. Because I don't go out of my way to offend, but at the same time, I don't apologize for offending. I just prefer to warn. With that said, let's get on with the show. Oh, and one more thing before I start. Um, this is my first live stream. I'm doing it with a mobile device. Don't know all the rules behind the live streaming yet, so I'm not sure how much time they're going to allot me to do this in. Being my first time out, but the cap is on it, so if I get cut off in mid sentence, please bear with me. I will definitely um, get back on as soon as possible and continue the story. With that said, uh, let's talk about the Skinner Man being part 4 of the story and all. As I left off in part 3, the I was with Granny Bathis, and right outside of Savannah, well, in the swamps of Savannah, Georgia. Hey, Papa Joy's advent. I know I have ADD, so this will happen often when I see people pop in. So, hey, Papa Joy, good to see you. Bear with my ADD. Again, if something cuts me off, bear with me. I'll get back on as soon as I can. Let the show begin. Like I said, where I left off at, I was bartering with Granny Bathis, the old hoodoo woman, and from the old hoodoo family right outside of Savannah, Georgia, for information about the Skinner Man. And she began to tell me the tale of where he originated at, and the spirit of the Skinner Man originated originally in Africa, came over with during the slave trade, and found its way into modern hoodoo slash voodoo culture. We in the voodoo religion, and for those who do not know that, I am Hugon. I am a voodoo priest. We have a different name for the Skinner Man. Um, I always hesitant to share my faith with people, but hey, fuck it. Um, he's actually a child in the G'day family, which is he's a his name is Il Detente, which by the way is a name that was given to me later on, which is another story altogether. He's known as Il Detente, who tempts, in the voodoo religion. This the spirit that takes the form of the Skinner Man and hoodoo practice. Um, Il Detente, he he tempts you with what you want the most as a punishment for wronging not him personally, but wronging his followers. Um, and they will usually go to a bakor, which is To put it in simple terms, a Bakor is he is the epitome of what you would consider a witch doctor. He's the darker side of the coin of voodoo, and they would go to him to implore that Il Detente go forth and teach someone a lesson. But like I said, most people um, who practice the hoodoo, they got the name Skinnerman because of what he does for them. He's again he's the same. He is the same being, but the other side of the coin. He's known as a Skinnerman. This is a darker interpretation that the hoodoo people found, and the hoodoo faith found. Well, it's not a faith. The hoodoo practitioners found more to their liking. Um, and before I go into a few more, before I get into the story of the invitation to meet the Skinner Man, yes, I was invited to meet the Skinner Man. And I'll tell you what, when I start bringing up the name, and tonight when I sleep, I'll guarantee you I'll have dreams of this son of a bitch. He's a truly terrifying entity. Um, when he is called up to punish someone who is in the hoodoo faith, well, in the hoodoo practice, to punish someone, he skins them. He skins their soul, which in a sense drives them insane. He appears to them in their dreams, he appears to them in reality. Usually, he appears to them as mirror images of the person that he sent to punish, and he drives them insane. Usually to the point to where they'll kill themselves. He will torture them and torture them. And from what I understood at the time was that he can only do it from moon to moon. So he has 1 month um, to extract your vengeance. Um, and every night he gets a little bit worse than the night before until he gets to the point to where you're going to want to die. He tortures you. He skins your soul. He skins your mind. Um, But there's another aspect to the Skinner Man that the local hunters will tell you about too. And this still happens, from what I understand, around Savannah, Georgia. People who hunt the swamps and hunt the local lands around there, they talk about the Skinner Man um, being responsible for the disappearance of hunters in the woods. Usually, they're hunters that are out hunting solo, and they're committing they're trespassing in places they should not be trespassing, and usually they're sacred to the hoodoo people, or they're sacred or their sanctified land that he's been asked to watch over. And he will this is where the literal and the literal name Skinner Man comes into play. When they would find some of these hunters that would disappear, you know, during hunting, when they're out hunting in the woods and hunting in the swamp, they would sometimes find their bodies, and they would literally be skinned from head to toe. No trace of where the skin went, no trace of any of the blood. Um, and you see the swamps and the forest and the land around Savannah has got many, many, many predators and um, many opportunistic predators. But the bodies that were touched by the Skinner Man, um, animals don't go near them. The flies don't go near them. The predators and the vultures won't go to them. The buzzards won't go near them. Nothing will touch the body. Um, Nothing chews on it or goes up and takes a bite out of it. It's left alone until it's found, if it's ever found, which I found interesting when I started finding into it. Okay. Um, I be rambling. So let me get back on track here. If anybody has any questions, post them up. I'll try to catch them as I go along as well. I can't guarantee I'll answer everything or comment on everything, but I will definitely try. You can't see my face? Is it just you, or is it anybody else who can't see me right now? Is there any time lapse or anything? Or is it just something weird going on because I live in this house of mysteries here in the middle of the Appalachian Mountains, surrounded by Bigfoot and demons? Not the literal sword. Oh, very good. Well, damn, super horror. You need to be able to see my charming face, so I hope it clears up. You might want to log out and log back in, dude. You might see me. I definitely want to see you. Oh shit. Ooh, sorry, dude. I hope your connection clears up. As I said before, I had to pay Granny Bath's price by giving her my full name and bits and pieces of me, fingernails, toenails, a little bit of skin, a little bit of hair, because I, believe it or not, I used to have hair on my head. Um, then finding out much later why she requested those items, because if I ever chose to work against her, she would have a direct line to cause me spiritual and possible physical harm in a paranormal sense. I need to stop reading your comments. I'm never going to finish the story if I keep reading your comments. Oh, fuck. I warned you there will be cuss words. That she would have, and I found out much later that practice in the Hoodoo faith is well, the Hoodoo religion. Well, I keep calling it a religion, but it's not a religion. The practice is called sympathetic magic. Um, um, and in sympathetic magic, a Hoodoo practitioner can cause you great physical harm and mental harm by having parts, bits and pieces of you in a jar that they can use to access you. Um, well, she got done with the history lesson about where the Skinnerman came from. I asked her because at the time I was not believing her at all. I was, like I said originally, I was there looking, being nosy and investigating a case of werewolf, and I shit you not, they were werewolf murders done around in a small little hamlet outside of Savannah. The murders were, and the locals thought it was a werewolf that was killing them. Will kill the children, kill the girls. But that's the story for another time. And that's originally where I found out about the Skinner Man, because the family of one of the little girls that was killed, Granny Bath has told me that she had been asked to aid, and the mother and the father were looking for revenge. They wanted to get revenge on the boy, who was at the time arrested for the murders. That the locals believe was a werewolf, but the police claimed he, they said it was superstitious, crazy locals. There was nothing lycanthropic or therianthropic or werewolfery about the guy. And I actually had the opportunity to talk to him in jail too, but that's for a different time. Well, apparently the parents of one of the little girls that was killed uh, had come to Granny Bath's and requested vengeance, and the Skinnerman carry out the vengeance for them because they believed he had done it. And Granny Bath has asked me, would I care to bear witness of the Skinner? And that's a direct quote, which in by my book when my book comes out next week. Um, that's a direct line. That's a direct quote. Oh fuck. And I looked at her and I said, and I just looked over and said, "You've got to be shitting me. You're actually asking me to come to this?" And she said, "Yes, you can come to it." She said, "But the only rule is that you're not allowed to speak. Um, Specifically, you can't ask questions of the family. You can't ask questions of her while it's going on." And she told me where to meet, where it was happening at. And it was actually happening at a local. Please, I don't need the money, but I appreciate everybody wanting to buy my book when it does come out. Took a lot of energy to get that book put together. I'm getting distracted. To meet at a local pond. It's apparently to summon the or ask the favor of the Skinnerman or to summon a Skinner. It has to be done at night, and it has to be done at midnight, and it has to be done at a body of water, whether it be a creek, a pond, a river, the ocean. You can get a kissed copy of it. I'll actually put lipstick on and kiss the inside of it, Papa Joey. God damn it, I'm getting distracted. Y'all are killing me tonight. That was good. Oh, God. I'm hanging in there. Okay. So, the night before, I was staying at a hotel. The night before, um, I was staying at a hotel in Savannah, and I had a very, oh my God. Don't worry. I want to, I actually want to do a book signing. I'll probably get arrested halfway through it, knowing my mouth, but I definitely want to do a book signing. But let's see where it goes. I would love to have a motion picture made of it too. I said, yeah, I did say motion picture. I didn't say movie. Preferably something Netflix would pick up, because then I can do any damn thing I want to with Netflix. And Netflix puts anything on, so they could do a series based on that book. Trust me, it'd be very interesting to watch. You'd shit your pants on some of the chapters in it. Literally, shit your pants. Okay, god damn it. Let me get back on track. Okay. The night before that the ceremony was supposed to take place, I was asleep in my hotel room, and I had a very interesting dream. Um, I dreamt that was, of course, I woke up. I didn't realize I was still dreaming, but I woke up in the hotel room and sat up in the bed, and at the foot of the bed was a black figure, um, quite indistinct. It was his body. And I always assumed it was a he because it spoke. That its body, the outlines of its body and the features of its face and the details of the body were blurry, like they were here and they weren't here. At one moment, sometimes I could see the eyes, and the eyes would go from blue to red to orange, and then the eyes would disappear completely. The same thing with the teeth. The teeth would go from white to yellow, and then when it smiled, and then they weren't there. But the general outline of the figure was incredibly sharp. It was black on black, if that makes sense. It wasn't a blue, midnight blue black. It was if black, if the color black had a soul, This was the soul of darkness. It truly was. This would be the soul of the dark. That the dark had a soul. And it put its hands on the bed and leaned down at me. And I could barely make out a nose here and there. And I was paralyzed sitting up in the bed. Um, and it spoke to me. And the voice was like a blend of a pig screaming, a cat wailing, and a little boy crying. It was a ululating sound. Um, if you've ever heard tin being cut, or tin being sheared, a tin roof for a tin roof being sheared, um, you had all these animal guttural sounds worked into this metallic tin sound of its voice. It hurt my ears, it hurt my eyes, it hurt my spirit to look at it, it hurt my eyes to gaze upon it, it hurt my ears um, to hear its voice. Um, it smelled like fresh pig's blood. Um, for anybody who's ever had the experience of going to a slaughterhouse, it's a pig's blood is a metallic coppery smell. Um, and I could taste what I was smelling in the air, like fresh pig's blood in the air, like I was at a slaughterhouse and it had just happened. Um, I could feel the heat of its breath as it spoke to me, and that bloody breath and those sharp, pointed teeth. Again, that would fade from white to yellow back to white. Um, I think it made a great effort to appear this way to me, to intimidate me. I think it was making a great effort to be as frightening as possible to me. Um, I could sense that about it. It it was as curious about me as I was to it, but it approached me with a sense of power. It wanted to be the dominant one in the room. It wanted to me to see its strength and know it's the fear that it could induce upon me. It enjoyed seeing me scared. And I just felt that, enjoying the moment that it was having with me. Um, but it looked at me right in the eyes and it said, in that screeching, ululating, multi layered voice, I hear you're going to come see me. And I literally pissed myself in the bed when it spoke that to me. I pissed myself. I whimpered. I cried. Um, I was absolutely terrified. It felt like I was bleeding from my ears when it said that to me. I wanted to try to push my way away from it, but I backed against the headboard and I couldn't go back any further. Um, and I don't think I could get out of the bed if I wanted to. There was just this horrible sense of paralysis of absolute. I was out of control. That I had no control over my body. That even if I did have control of it, it would make sure that I wouldn't leave the room or leave the bed. Um, you have to remember, though, I didn't realize that this was a dream at the time. After it looked at me and says, I hear you're gonna come see me, it smiled. Its whole face split. Literally, the darkness of its face split into showing me even more of its teeth. And it said to me, you give your name away too freely. And I look forward to knowing you. And it reached out. Or I always wore socks to bed at the time. I don't anymore, but I always wore socks to bed. I was taught that. So if you were ever in a burning house, you at least have your socks on when you go outside the house. Don't ask. It's an old tale. And it grabbed my feet. And it said one more thing to me. It said, rest up. And it laughed. That screeching, horrible, metallic laugh. As it pulled its hands away from my feet, I could feel it cutting through my feet, through my socks with these sharp metal hands. It If you've ever cut your hand with a butcher knife, you don't feel the pain right away, but you know you did it because you could feel as it slices in, but you don't feel the pain yet. And that's what it felt like. It as it pulled its hands away from my feet, that it was leaving behind cuts on my feet. And it literally stepped away and broke up, and the black of itself broke up into the black of the room and faded away. And that's when I snapped awake up in bed. And I found out that I had pissed myself quite literally in bed. And I had tears drying. That apparently I was crying too. I had tears drying on my face. And that my left ear had a drying trickle of blood that had come out of it. And so indeed, its voice, its presence made me bleed. I didn't shit myself. I just merely pissed myself a lot. Luckily, it was a hotel room, so, and it wasn't a very good hotel room either. I sat there in my own filth. Um, I was freezing and burning up at the exact same time. If anybody has ever had that experience of a raging fever that are you're burning up on the inside but freezing on the outside. That's what I was experiencing at the time. And I'll tell you what, it's still emotional to this day because that was, again, I was just discovering the paranormal and the magic of the rest of the world when I discovered this, and ran into this. And up to this point, I had not been truly, nothing had gone out of its way to try to scare me or intimidate me or introduce itself to me. I had had for those who know me well, know my little companion, my little dark girl, my little spirit guide who's been with me my entire life. She was one of my first experiences in the world of the supernatural and paranormal. And I had known nothing but guidance and kindness from her. Um, but this is the first time I'd actually felt true fear and true terror. And one day I'll have to tell you what the definition of true fear is. But believe me, um, this is the literal definition of true fear. And when I was able to crawl myself out of bed, I looked at my feet because I thought for sure that it had cut all my toes off or cut my foot off because I still had that dream pain in my feet. And my socks had 5 slits in them, or it looked like a straight razor, 5 straight razors had pulled itself across my socks. My skin, my feet, my legs, they were completely untouched. But this thing in my dream, had cut my socks to ribbons. And I had a fuck this moment at that point. At the time, I was driving a '73 Chevy. It was a, it was my Batmobile. I drove that thing everywhere. It was a tank. And I actually got up and went out to the hotel room. I went out of the hotel room, still, covered in piss and half naked. We left all my stuff in there. And I crawled up in my car and I slept the rest of the night inside of my car. I had to convince myself that this just happened. This just fucking happened. And I have two choices. I can either follow through with it and go out after this meeting and find the truth, or I can pack my shit up and get out of town as fast as possible and forget this ever happened. Um, but at that time, I was relatively young and ornery and bullheaded, and I got pissed. I sat in the car and I got pissed before I fell asleep. I was so mad. I said, "Cannot believe, if this is what's really happening, that this bastard did this to me. He's not chasing me off. He's not going to get rid of me this easy. They're not going to scare me away from this." Um, so I slept in the car for the rest of the night. Sorry, I had to read some of your comments, guys. I know I'm trying not to read so I can stay focused because you all know my ADHD will get me off on a tangent if I'm not careful. Well, the next morning I got up. I was still wearing my torn socks and walked back up in the half naked Bigfoot. It's a joke. Get it? Went back up into the hotel room to wash all the dried piss off my body, clean my ears up you know, and my ears, when you go to high altitudes or whether you're flying or you're going up into the mountains, how your ears feel like there's stuff and you got to get them popped. Well, that's how my ears were feeling the next morning. And it took me forever to get them quote unquote popped. So, but I had a ringing sound in my ears that it took me almost a month to get rid of. I kept hearing ringing in my ears like an old phone ringing in my ears constantly. Um, and I went out, spent the day in the hotel room. I didn't want to leave it because that night is where I was going to go out and, go to the ceremony of the Skinner and the calling of the Skinner. Like I said earlier, I had met this family um, where, one of the little boys had mentioned the Skinner, and which got me off on one of my crazy tangents where I wanted to find out about him. Well, it was, this was the same family that wanted revenge, that wanted that wanted the boy, the accused werewolf, to be punished. And so I waited till the sun went down, and I drove out to the pond. And I'll tell you what, that was the longest, loneliest drive I was ever on. Um, if anybody's ever had experience driving through swamps or driving through marshlands, um, especially with your windows down and bad headlights, and it's so dark, you can't see shit in front of you, but you can hear everything around you out in the swamp and out in the woods while you're driving over the sounds of the engine, whether it's imagined or not. And you're by yourself. It's quite an experience, and fuck with you quite a bit when you're out there. Yeah, it was about a 2-hour drive actually to go out to the site, out to the pond. where the ceremony was going to take place at. And I saw a group of people beside an old cow gate. All farmers out there will know what a cow gate is. Beside a barbed wire fence that was on a dirt trail that was going back to the pond. And I parked there and I walked up and they looked at me, and the people, and I recognized the family I'd spoken to earlier, where their daughter had been killed. Um, Members of the family. And they said, uh, so you're here to pay witness? And I went, I suppose I am here to pay witness. um, that was a phrase that I was used to hearing when you grow up in the mountains. You hear that a lot from some of the more spiritual people in the mountains, and some of the old mountain witches and stone workers in the mountains, and you hear that phrase used quite often to pay witness. Uh, it depends on the definition of it depends on the context it's being used in. Um, so I waited, but it's something you hear from people again from the woods, from the backwoods, and people who don't have this. Their civilization ends where actual civilization begins. So let me pause just for a second before I continue the tale of walking back to the woods with the Skinner. Oh, let me know. Do you want me to finish the tale now, or do you guys want me to pick up later with it as another chapter? If you don't mind making a comment. Um, I don't want to make you feel like you're obligated to sit here for hours for me to finish the story, but we're getting close to the end. So what do you think? Finish it. Oh shit. Well, that laugh came out slightly more diabolical than I meant it to be. I'll finish it. Again, I might have to do some addendums and do some follow-up videos to explain some of the things that happened, because I always like giving, you know, educate. I like to try to educate people on some of the things that I say and some of the experiences that I've had that I feel that they may need it. So if you're all in for it, then I'm in for it as well. So let us do this. Let us finish baking this cake. Well, they told me I was here to pay witness, so. Oh, and I should tell you how everybody was dressed. Me, I was dressed in a pair of overalls with a plaid shirt. I shit you not, and some shit kicking boots that I had on too. That I was out there with it. Um, that was something easy to wear out there in the woods. I do have a lot of that's another story, because you guys may find the trial of the werewolf boy intriguing, because I got to learn that there are three distinct types of werewolves out there, but that's another story for another time. But the story of the werewolf boy is what led me to discover the three specific types, especially the ones that live here in the United States. Three types of werewolves that exist here and live here amongst us here in the United States. Um, Three different species of it that live here in the United States. But without that, again, I was dressed in my overalls, shit cooking boots, and my plaid shirt with long sleeves. I also carried several knives in my pockets, just in case. I traveled with a gun. Well, I traveled with two guns. One was a sawed-off uh, double barrel 12 gauge, and the other one was a small 22 pistol. Um, I traveled with those things. They belonged to my family, and they gave them to me when I went traveling so I could keep myself safe. At the time, the world was not safe. But I didn't have my guns on me. I just had my knives on me, just in case, somebody wanted to have their version of deliverance there in the swamplands of Savannah, Georgia. I was not going to squeal like a piggy. And well, at least I was going to put up a fight if they did try to make me squeal like a piggy. And how they were dressed, how the family that was there was dressed. I know everybody. There's a lot of people out there that are horror movie fans like me, but they were dressed. They were all dressed, the men and the women, and the little girls and little boys that were there, were all dressed like Malachi from the original Children of the Corn movie. I shit you not. Um, if you don't know the reference, guys, you need to need to look that up. um, but they were, and actually, it had been only a couple of years since that movie had been out, so so that movie was still stuck in my head because I actually went to a drive-in to watch it when it first came out. Yeah, I did attend drive-ins. I'm that old, but I went there to see what it was like when it came out. um, and they said just follow us, and they all had they had but they were all holding a mixture of railroad lanterns, the ones that are run by kerosene. For those who don't know, they were kerosene lanterns, and they were railroad lanterns. They Again, you have to look it up, or what a railroad lantern that was run by kerosene looked like originally. And some of them had flashlights. Nobody had pitchforks and torches or anything. What they had to see. So I just followed them, and it seemed like we'd been walking for about an hour on this trail, going back into the woods, going back deeper into the marshier and swampier areas. Um, you could hear the alligators in the woods. Um, swear to everything that I hold holy that I heard something that sounded like a jaguar in the woods, crying in the woods. Let off a yowl in the woods. It wasn't a bobcat. I knew what a bobcat sounded like. This damn thing sounded like something straight out of a Tarzan movie. A freaking jaguar, as loud as possible in the woods, that made me jump. They didn't flinch in the least. I was the one that was walking behind them that was looking around going, fuck, 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 at every little sound that I heard out there in the woods. They were silent the entire time they were walking down, and they never turned around to see if I was still following them. They kept looking forward. Of course, simple me didn't think much of it at the time why they were being that way. And they never stepped off that dirt trail, by the way, either. And something told me in my gut that I should not step off the dirt trail either. I was pretty sure I wouldn't be seen anymore if I did wander off that trail. I'd be digested by some of the wild beasts of the woods. Like I said, it was about an hour's walk down there. We came to the pond. Well, they had a literal bonfire in front of a body of water that I'm just going to call a pond. It didn't have any other water leading into it, so it was just a body of water sitting there. Where, of course, it had the huge marsh reeds around it from what I could see from the bonfire. And the pond itself looked inky black from the shadows. And there was Granny Bathos with her family. I use that loosely. Her family consisted of four young ladies, well, four ladies of varying ages, Granny Bathos being the oldest, and I figured by the looks of the way the others looked, they were all members of her family. They all had similar facial features, and I just assumed those were members of her family that came to help do it. And that's when Granny Mathis turned, and they literally parted. The family that I was walking behind parted, and she motioned for me to come up. She says, "The witness come forth is the witness must come forth." I shit you not. Again, this sounded like something out of a really bad freaking grindhouse movie, but I shit you not, it happened. So I walked up there. I have to say, at this point, I couldn't feel my hands or feet. I was beginning to get scared to the point where I couldn't feel my hands or feet anymore. Um, and my mouth was completely dry. And I walked up, and she put her hand on my head, across my head, and brought it down across my eyes. And before she took her hand away, she said, "Are you ready to pay witness to the rising of the Skinner?" And I stopped for a minute, and her hand started pressing against my face, pressing against my face, pressing against my face, pressing against my face. And I finally said yes. And that's when she took her hand away. And then I watched her lead the father of the little girl who had been killed. She motioned for him to come up and motioned for me to walk down. And they went to the edge, down to the pond. Um, then I noticed that one of, Granny Bath's one of her little minions was trailing along behind us, and she was holding a wooden box. It was it's like a little wooden pirate chest that she was walking with at the time. And that's when when we got to the edge of the pond, she told me, "Stay, you stand here. You watch. You listen. You don't speak." And she walked up to the father, and the girl that had the box up, and Granny Bathurst took out a knife. It looked like an old buck knife. Um, I swear to God, it was either rust or dried blood that was on it. But to me, at the time, it just reminded me of more of old dried blood that was on the knife. And she looked at the father and asked him, "Is this what you want?" And he just looked at her and said, "This is what I need." And she took his hand, his left hand. She drew the knife across his hand, and he started bleeding. Of course, she cut him pretty damn deep in the hand. Then she reached in the wooden chest, and she pulled out two things. She pulled out what looked to be a skin of a rattlesnake that had been skinned, not shed. That was an actual skin to a rattlesnake. And then she pulled out something that like very thin leather. And it took me a few moments. I was squinting, looking at it, keeping my mouth shut like I was told to. Um, it was human skin. It was a strip of human skin. It was about, it was less than 3 feet long. It'd come off of someone's back or off their leg, I had looked at, and it appeared to have been cured or tanned. It was supple. It was not hard like skin will become when it's taken. Don't ask how I know. I'll have to explain another time that when human skin's taken off and it's not treated properly, it gets hard and brittle and yellow. But if treated properly, it is supple like leather. I will have to explain that another time how I know this. And before anybody makes any Texas Chainsaw references, trust me, it ain't that bad. The story ain't that bad. And she took the two pieces of skin and she wrapped them around his hand, where the blood was dripping from. And she pointed to the water and she said, "Go ask him. Give him what's his and ask him." She was referring to the Skinner, asking him. And apparently, giving him what's his is the sacrifice was blood. Giving him blood to seal the deal, so to speak, to call up the Skinnerman. He walked down to the pond and held his hand over the pond. Um, and he said, I want the man who killed my girl. I want the man who's sitting in jail. I want the man who wronged my family and took away my life and the joy. I want him to suffer." And the wind started blowing ever so slightly through the reeds. And I swear to everything that I hold sacred and dear, that I heard something in the reeds when the wind blew through them say, well, ask, "Is suffering all you want? And suffering I can give. But will that be enough?" And I realized this was a ritual. The Skinner was there with us, partially, but he wasn't going to come there unless he was asked to come there. And it was true that the Skinner was going to cause suffering, but the Father wanted more than suffering. And that's what he said. He said, "Suffering is what I want, but his life is what I need." And I heard something in the reeds when the wind was blowing through the reeds and across the water. Sigh. It was this, but more of a moan of pleasure. Something primal, something atavistic. Um, I'll let you look up the word atavistic if you don't know what it is. You can contact me and explain what atavistic means, but it's a near synonym to primal. And he said, "Well, then give me what is mine." And the Father took his hand, the cut hand, squeezed it as hard as he could over the water. And I swear, for just a moment, that I wasn't looking at a snake skin anymore, but I was looking at a real snake that had coiled itself around his hand. And the skin, the human skin that was wrapped around his hand, was living skin, that it was breathing and moving on its own just for a minute, just for a second. When he said that, I saw the snake, and I saw the skin, and it was real, it was alive, and it was writhing around his hands. And he squeezed his hand until the blood poured out across the water. And that's when Granny Bathurst chimed in and said, "The deal is made. From moon to moon, the deal is made." And then that's when things got really scary. I don't know how many people are familiar with the sound of a coyote that's being killed um, by something, that something's attacking it, the sounds that it makes, the cries that it makes, the screams that it makes. But the darkness around us erupted with something that sounded like that, like a coyote, and it was screaming all around us. And the wind started blowing harder. And just for the briefest of seconds, that dark shadow, that soul of darkness, that soul of the dark, appeared beside me, and it whispered in my ear, "Remember this." And I fell down on my knees. I was shaking from head to toe, with the wind blowing and that thing that whispered in my ears and these animal screams all around me. And then that's when I realized that Granny Bathis was kneeling down beside me. She put her hand on my head. And she said, "He likes you. He's taken a liking to you. You've been blessed. Do you have, do you know?" I said, "Do you know what?" And I looked at her because I just had a mixture of fear and anger and how can I fucking be here right now? These people are fucking insane. I was terrified. So now what are they gonna, I kept thinking, what are they gonna do to me now? And I looked at her and I said, "What do you mean by that?" She says, "Has he answered your questions? Are you still curious?" And she smiled. Her crooked smile with her rotted teeth and yellow, roomy eyes that held more life than any eyes I'd ever seen. And she just stood up, started walking away from me. And I could hear everybody walking away behind me. And I just kept looking at the ground, scared, angry. I didn't know what had happened, what was going to happen to me. And for another second, it apparently was longer than a second, I stopped hearing people walking. Sound of walking finally vanished. The bonfire had gone to a flicker behind me to the size of a small campfire. I was starting to hear I don't know how many people have ever heard a bull gator at night. What they sound like when they're calling, that territorial call, or trying to attract a mate. It's an interesting sound, but I could hear it in the darkness around me and the darkness that was increasing around me at the time. And I finally pushed myself up, stood up, and looked behind me and realized that everybody had left me. They had left me sitting there on the ground, kneeling on the ground. Nobody came to help me. And I heard that voice again, that dark, dark soul of a voice. So many voices in that voice, human and inhuman. Say, "Do you need me to walk you out?" All you got to do is take my hand, and I'll walk you where you want to go. That's when I realized that that ceremony they'd committed and pulled him out of the water, well, pulled him out of a reflective surface, out of whatever spiritual realm that he was walking in, the Skinner, that he was now walking in spiritual form, but he was walking in the physical world as a spirit. And it still felt the need to communicate with me. I didn't know what to say when I heard that. I didn't want to look behind me. I didn't want to look to the sides of me. And then that's when I saw my little girl, my little spirit guardian, my spirit guide, my protector. She popped in front of me, wearing a white and blue dress, without her eyes, without many features of her face. And she reached out and took my hand. And she told me, that I was very curious. And she had once told me that my curiosity was not necessarily a good thing. And that for this time, and this time only, which come to find out was not true because it happened again, she says she would lead me out of the darkness. And then she faded from view, but I could still feel her there with me. But I could still feel that black, dark thing that they had summoned into this world. It was still all around me. I could feel it draining the heat from my body. I was getting cold and just colder and colder and colder. And except for my hand. The only thing that did not get cold was the hand that my little spirit guide had touched and was holding. She told me I knew she was still there. And I used that warmth and that energy to walk the fuck back home, walk back up the trail, and get back to my car. And everybody had left. There was no signs that anybody had ever been there at that gate that I had walked by when I got up there. And I drove home. Well, to my hotel room, which at the time was my home. I didn't sleep, of course. I didn't sleep for multiple days after that. But the young man who was being accused of the murders, the werewolf murders in the town, it was about the third day after the ceremony. They had placed him on. There had been some incident at the jailhouse, and apparently he had tried to kill himself. He had gone quite batshit crazy and tore his cell apart and was trying to use bits and pieces of shrapnel stuff he'd torn up in there to slit his wrists or try to hang himself or choke himself. And he was put on suicide watch. And that's when I realized Skinner was at work. I'm going to pause it right here, guys, because I'm losing energy right now myself. If anybody has any comments, I'll be happy to entertain them. I promise you we'll pick up on the story again. There's not much left to it. I did experience the Skinner about 4 more times while I was in that town. And I promise you I'll tell the tale of the of the werewolf murders. It's an interesting story, full of a lot of backwoods lore. But if anybody has any comments or questions, let's see. Well, I'm glad everybody enjoyed it tonight. I wish everyone the best. Sleep well. I'll be happy if anybody has any questions or anything. You can always direct them on Twitter. You know, I'm always on Twitter. You can always DM me or ask me in public forum. I'm not afraid to answer questions. But I'm beginning to fall apart. So hopefully I can end this session without deleting this video. Good night, everyone. Sleep tight. I'll see you all in the morning. God, I think I just fucked this thing up.